All right, so today we are really diving into this whole manufactured wooden building assembler thing.
Okay.
You sent over some interesting stuff from RoleCatcher about this career path.
Yeah.
And honestly, I got to say, I'm pretty curious about it.
Right.
It seems like one of those jobs that's like a cool mix of old school craftsmanship,
Yeah.
but also some pretty cutting edge construction technology.
Definitely. Yeah.
So maybe for those of us who aren't exactly, construction experts,
Yeah.
could you kind of break down what we're really talking about here?
Sure. Yeah.
When we say modular construction,
Uh-huh.
what does that even mean in this context?
Yeah. So basically, imagine like giant Lego sets,
Okay.
but instead of those little plastic bricks, you're dealing with like entire walls, floors, even
Yeah.
whole rooms, and they're all built off site in a factory. Like these modules are completely decked out. Like they have windows, doors, plumbing,
Oh, wow.
everything.
So it's like ready to go.
Pretty much, yeah.
They just like plop it off the truck.
Exactly, yeah. They ship them to the building site, and then it's kind of like putting together this giant 3D jigsaw puzzle.
Wow.
And that's where these manufactured wooden building assemblers come in.
Okay.
They're the ones like reading those super complex technical drawings. They
Uh-huh.
make sure everything fits together perfectly.
So it's like high stakes Tetris, but in real life
Exactly.
with like actual buildings.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just like your typical summer construction gig.
Right. Right.
You need some serious skills for this.
So like, what are we talking about here? What kind of skills do you need for this job?
So you definitely need physical stamina.
Yeah.
You got to be detail-oriented
Uh-huh.
and have a really good grasp of like basic construction principles.
Yeah.
Like these guys and gals, they're working with all sorts of tools and materials, like
Yeah.
everything from, hand saws to those like really high-tech fasteners.
Wow.
And then on top of that, they have to be able to read those technical drawings.
Right. It's like blueprints, but probably way more complicated.
Oh, yeah, definitely way more intense, like blueprints on steroids.
Okay.
And then they have to take all that information and turn it into an actual building.
It's like you need a good mix of brains and brawn to do this kind of work.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, what's it actually like day to day?
Well, it's definitely a job where you got to be adaptable.
Okay.
Like you could be on a factory floor one day, surrounded by all the craziness of like the assembly line. And then the next day you're out on a construction site, maybe battling the weather.
Right.
It's a dynamic environment for sure.
So there's definitely some pros and cons to this whole thing, right?
Surely.
Like, what are some of the biggest perks, you think, of this kind of job?
Well, the demand for this type of construction, like prefabrication, it's blowing up right now.
Makes sense.
People want homes, and they want them built faster and more efficiently.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole prefabrication thing really shines.
Okay.
So for people who are good at this, it means job stability and potentially making some good money.
Yeah, I bet.
Plus, let's be real, there's something really satisfying about building something tangible with your own two hands.
Yeah.
It's a career where you can actually see the results of your work, like literally rising up around you.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, I gotta admit.
Yeah.
But okay, I have to ask, what about the downsides?
Oh, of course.
What are some of the challenges someone might face in this line of work?
Well, it can be really physically demanding.
Yeah.
And sometimes the tasks can get a bit repetitive.
Okay.
You're on your feet a lot, lifting heavy stuff.
Uh-huh.
You might be working in a noisy factory or dealing with unpredictable weather outside.
Yeah.
And like a lot of trades, the starting pay might not be amazing,
Right.
but it usually gets better with experience and as you learn more specialized skills.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. It's not always easy, but it seems like the kind of job where hard work really pays off.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And speaking of that, RoleCatcher seems to really emphasize that this isn't just like a temporary gig.
Right.
It's a career path with a lot of potential for growth.
Yeah, totally. And one of the most interesting things about it is how much it's changing.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it's not just about, hammering and sawing anymore.
Okay.
Technology is really starting to change the game.
That's interesting because you usually think of construction as this like very traditional industry.
Yeah.
But it sounds like technology is even shaking things up when it comes to something as like hands-on as building these prefabricated modules.
Oh, absolutely. Like take computer-aided design, for example, or
Yeah.
CAD,
Okay.
architects and engineers. They use the software to make these incredibly detailed 3D models of the structures.
Okay.
And then those digital blueprints are what guide the whole manufacturing process. Wow.
And make sure everything fits together perfectly when they get to the site.
So even though the actual work is very hands-on, there's this whole digital side to it too.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It makes you wonder if we're going to see like robots taking over construction sites anytime soon.
Yeah, right. That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, automation is definitely becoming more common,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's more about humans and robots working together.
Okay.
Like, we might see robots doing some of the more repetitive stuff.
Right, the heavy lifting.
Yeah, exactly. Or things that are really physically demanding,
Okay.
but you'll always need skilled human assemblers
Yeah, that makes sense.
because they're the ones who can problem solve and adapt to new situations.
Right. You can't really program a robot to think on its feet. Exactly. And they have that like human touch that's so important for quality craftsmanship.
Totally. Like, you can program a robot to follow instructions,
Right.
but you can't program creativity
Yeah.
or like that ability to just figure things out on the spot.
Exactly. And those are the skills that really make a good assembler great.
Yeah, I bet.
Because you're always going to run into unexpected stuff on a job site.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like maybe the materials are slightly different than what you were expecting, or the weather throws you a curveball.
Right.
That's when you need someone who can think critically, be resourceful, and come up with creative solutions.
It's like we often think of these blue-collar jobs as being very, task-oriented,
Yeah.
but it actually sounds like they require a lot of creative problem solving.
Yeah, for sure.
Almost like being like an architect or an engineer in a way.
Absolutely. And that's something that RoleCatcher talks about too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they highlight how many transferable skills you pick up in this line of work.
Okay, so it's not just about learning to use specific tools.
Right.
But it's like you're developing a whole way of thinking that could be useful in a lot of different fields.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, what are some examples of those transferable skills?
Well, for one, you're constantly looking at and understanding those technical drawings,
Okay.
which really strengthens your spatial reasoning skills
Makes sense.
and your ability to visualize things in 3 dimensions.
Right, like you're basically learning a new language.
Yeah, kind of.
But instead of words, it's blueprints and 3D models.
Exactly. And then there's the whole problem-solving aspect we talked about.
Right.
You're always adapting to new challenges, thinking on your feet,
Yeah.
and finding solutions within the limits of whatever project you're working on.
Right.
And those skills are in high demand everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't matter if you're talking about project management or software development.
Totally.
Being able to solve problems is essential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like problem solving and communication. Those are the real tools of the trade here.
Totally. And let's not forget about teamwork.
Right.
These guys are often working as part of a crew.
Uh-huh.
So being able to communicate clearly and work together effectively is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are valuable skills anywhere.
For sure.
And speaking of valuable skills, I wanted to circle back to RoleCatcher's tools for job seekers. They seem to have some really interesting stuff there.
Definitely.
Almost like, cheat codes for navigating the job market.
Yeah, totally. And one thing they really stress is how important it is to tailor your resume for each specific job.
Oh, interesting.
Even if it's in the same field, like they say a generic resume is like a generic building.
Okay.
It might get the job done, but it's not going to stand out.
Right. It's not going to win any awards.
Exactly.
So what do they suggest people do to make their resumes really pop for a job like this?
Well, it goes back to those transferable skills we were talking about.
Okay.
Like, it's not enough to just list every tool you know how to use.
Uh-huh.
You have to really highlight those problem-solving abilities, your attention to detail,
Okay.
your experience working on those complicated projects with tight deadlines.
Right.
All those things that show a potential employer what you really bring to the table.
So it's not just about, it's about how you apply it.
Exactly.
And they even give you example interview questions and answers, right?
Yeah, they do. It's like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain.
That's super helpful.
Oh, yeah, totally. And they also give you tips on how to emphasize those key skills during an interview.
Okay.
It's one thing to say you're a good problem solver, but it's way more impactful if you can actually show it.
Show, don't tell.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's really about understanding your own value and being able to communicate that effectively.
Absolutely. And that's where I think RoleCatcher's resources can be so helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
They give job seekers that extra edge in what can be a really competitive job market.
Absolutely. This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, it has. We've learned so much about this career path, from the skills you need to the challenges you might face,
For sure.
and of course, how to actually land a job in the field.
And we've seen how technology is changing things
Right. Totally.
and how important it is for people to keep learning and adapting to those changes if they want to succeed.
It's amazing how much there is to discover, even in a field that seems pretty straightforward on the surface.
Yeah, you never really know until you dig a little deeper.
Exactly. Well said. So, on that note, let's leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about how technology is changing how we build homes these days.
Yeah.
With prefabrication, computer-aided design, all that stuff.
Right.
But what about how those homes are actually designed in the first place?
Oh, interesting.
Could we get to a point where artificial intelligence is actually creating building plans?
Wow.
Like, would that change the job of a manufactured wooden building assembler?
That's a really fascinating question.
Right.
I mean, as technology keeps advancing, who knows what the future holds for construction?
Totally.
But it's definitely an exciting time to be a part of building the world around us.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of manufactured wooden building assembly.
Sounds good.
Until next time, stay curious out there.